How's it going, American history students? This is Mr. Bell coming back at you with another online video lesson. Today we're going to be covering the 1.2 notes. This is meant to complement the 1.2 notes PowerPoint that you will find right here on Canvas under Exploration and Colonization. As far as testing at the end of Unit 1, there won't be a test. However, there will be a quiz. This is going to be 10 to 15 questions. So if you want to start studying and preparing for that, I will definitely email and announce the date of that quiz as it gets closer and we actually get really started into this semester. So you can access the notes I'm going to be using right here. I'm going to pull up my personal copy of the notes and we're going to get started. You can always, don't forget, you can always email me bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org and any questions, concerns, something you're not understanding, I'll do the best I can to convey this information to you. So this is not going to be as long as last notes section, but it's definitely not the shortest either. Let's get started. There are two primary forms of government. There is a democracy created by the Greeks. This is where everybody votes on every single issue. This can create chaos and sometimes mob rule. Then there is a republic. This notion comes from the Romans, and it is electing officials to vote and make big decisions for us. Many people ask, what is the United States of America? Are we a democracy or are we a republic? The answer is we are both. On certain issues, like whether to build a new arena in Charlotte for the Charlotte Hornets, formerly the Charlotte Bobcats, people got to go vote whether or not tax money would be spent on that arena, and whether or not the NBA in turn would come to Charlotte or come back to Charlotte. But on most issues, we practice more as a republic because we elect people to make decisions for us. Governors, senators, House reps, of course, presidents, vice presidents. So we are both. So when people ask, is America a republic or democracy, it's a representative democracy. Now, a lot of our ideas that we use to set up our government is based on previous British norms. So basically what the founders did, who were of all of British descent, of course, was they picked out the best part of England's government, the British government, like a Bill of Rights, like a Supreme Court. They said, we're going to use those things because we think they're effective, but we're going to get rid of things like the absolute monarchy. So you have to go way back to 1215. The Magna Carta was the first time any king in England had his power limited by the government. It gave their government, which is Parliament, more power over the king. So when the king wanted to do certain things, he had to get approval from Parliament. He had to work with them. Parliament is divided into two houses, a House of Lords and a House of Commons. The House of Lords would be more comparable to our Senate. The House of Commons would be more comparable to our House of Representatives. Of course, we call it Congress, not Parliament. So we borrowed this idea from them and kind of rebranded it, tweaked it into a system that we thought would be more effective. England also has a Bill of Rights. When you see Bill of Rights, whether it's in England or the United States, that is all about giving power back to the people, making sure there is a balance between how much power the government has and how much power the individual has. And we'll talk more about that as we move into our Bill of Rights in Unit 2. So, the English Bill of Rights, what are some things that we kind of borrow from it? Forbidding cruel and unusual punishment. You don't cut somebody's hand off if they steal a candy bar like you would if you were practicing Sharia law in a place like Syria, strict Islamic law. The right to protest or petition the government, things of that nature. What other things does the United States government take from England and Parliament? The biggest one is going to be common law, and this is something that is focused heavily on in your very first quiz. And usually I'm I give a ton of quizzes, and you don't need to sweat quizzes too much. But that being said, guys, I'm not giving a ton of quiz. You're going to have either a quiz or test per unit. There's 7.5 units in American history. So you need to make the best you can out of those quizzes. So before I get into common law, let's talk about statute. Statute is simply a written law. It has been passed through an elected body, signed into law. It's on the books. Common law is law based on past court decisions. We're going to look at it through the United States lens, of course, since this is American history. An example of common law, probably the easiest examples of common law to understand are famous, or I should say sometimes infamous, Supreme Court cases. So let's take something like Roe versus Wade, the most controversial ruling the Supreme Court has made in the United States in 1973. Based on the right to privacy, the Supreme Court gave women the right to choose across all 50 states whether or not they wanted to have an abortion. Now, limits could be put on those abortion rights, like George Bush banning third trimester abortions and things of that nature. However, a state could not legally ban abortion like it had previously done in some more conservative states. So in 1973, and I'm assuming you understand the makeup of the Supreme Court, but if you don't, there's 9 justices appointed by the president. If it's a liberal president, he appoints a liberal justice. If it's a conservative president, he appoints a conservative justice. The Senate has to confirm that justice. Is an odd number, so there's never a tie in the Supreme Court, the way there could be in like the Senate, where the vice president would have to break that 50-50 tie. Of course, there's 100 senators, so there could be a tie and the vice president would have to break it. That's impossible with the odd number Supreme Court justices. So they ruled that abortion was legal. And this law was never passed through the House, never passed through the Senate, never signed by any president. So a lot of people have a problem with that law that they view as murder. In the early 2000s, I think it was 2003, the Supreme Court revisited Roe versus Wade, a woman's right to choose whether or not to have an abortion. And it was close. It was a 5-4 decision, but they kept a woman's right to choose in the United States. So if they would have undone that, that would have been known as a reversal. Can Supreme Court cases be undone? Yes, the Supreme Court can reverse them. That's what you see in things like Plessy versus Ferguson created separate but equal separate facilities for black and white people. But Brown v. Board in the 1950s, reversed that decision. Of course, Brown versus Board of Education ended segregation. So I want you to understand that common law is law based on Supreme Court decisions. There was a period of time in the 15 and 1600s, late 1500s going into the 1600s, known as Enlightenment in Europe. So this is predating America, which of course is founded in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. But a lot of the ideas that our government's based on, our founding fathers like Jefferson, Hamilton, borrowed these ideas from these Enlightenment thinkers and expand upon them, kind of pick and choose what they really like. And there are a few, but we're going to just really hit the high notes here of Enlightenment thinkers. And I really only want to focus on 2. Feel free to study the other ones, but the only ones you will see on a quiz or test from me are John Locke and Voltaire. And that's who I'm going to focus on, mainly John Locke. John Locke believed in this notion of a social contract. In other words, Americans need to, I'm saying Americans because, of course, that's how Jefferson's going to phrase it. He wasn't an American, he's a British, but that people in society need to give up certain individual freedoms and make sacrifices for society to function as a whole. Let me give you the easiest example of this possible. Taxes. You go to work, you work hard, you earn that money. The government, state and federal, take a certain percentage of that money. It's anywhere between 10 to 23%, depending on who the president is at that time and who the governor is in your state. But Then taking that 10 or 23, 24%, that's money you earned. You work for that money. That's your money. But you give up that money, and they use it to build schools, roads, bridges, tunnels, hospitals, parks, things that help people thrive in public, things that are for public works and the public good. So you sacrifice your tax money, but you get a better society. You see this when you travel. Maybe you go to the roads in South Carolina. They're bumpy, they're holy because their taxes are not as high as North Carolina. But you cross the state line, come back to North Carolina, all of a sudden it's smooth. That's because we have a little bit higher taxes, but we keep our roads up. So that's an example of a social contract at work, income taxes. Voltaire is the next one I want to focus on. The notion of free speech, which will lead to free press and freedom of religion. And I'm going to focus on that later in Unit 2, really get into freedom of religion. However, these will become the basis for the First Amendment. So you got to know that Voltaire, the French philosopher, his beliefs, free speech, free expression, free religion, set the basis for our First Amendment. Again, John Locke, important. All men are created equal, which will become the ideal espoused in the Declaration of Independence. I'm not saying Montesquieu, Hobbes, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau are not important. They're extremely important historically. We just got to move at a quicker pace, and you can study those at your own leisure. Crosby versus Zenger. We will talk about American Supreme Court cases in here, not as much as you would have in civics. But this is the only British Supreme Court case we're going to talk about. Crosby versus Zenger set the precedent, the example for free speech in America, even though it's a British Supreme Court case. So let's kind of talk about that. There was a newspaper writer who printed true but negative things about the King of England in 1735. The king had it struck him from the paper and wanted to punish John Peter Zenger, who wrote the piece criticizing him. He sued. It went to their Supreme Court. Their Supreme Court ruled in his favor. And this led to not only free speech, but eventually free press in England. And, of course, that's an idea we will borrow. Just because something's negative, as long as it's not something that is completely false, is meant to be detrimental to the person, a character assassination, something as we call in our government, again, the bells recording here on a teacher workday, is libel. If you print something and it's libel, L-I-B-E-L, that means you're printing false information just to destroy someone, usually politically. Not liable, which is where if somebody fell off your trampoline and broke their arm, you would have to pay their hospital bills. So libel, two different things. Slander is spoken hate, spoken false, spoken lies. So sets a precedent for not libel, but freedom of speech, freedom of press. As long as it's true, there's sources, there's people on the record, you can prove it. You can print negative things about the president. You can print negative things about the Prime Minister of England. So I'm going to focus here. I'm going to go out of order on these in the PowerPoint. I'm going to start with the Mayflower Compact and go to the Virginia House of Burgesses. Now, this is heavy on your quiz, so pay attention to these parts, just like real school interruptions. So, earlier when this video lesson started, I said democracy is where people vote on every single issue, derived from the Greeks. A republic is where you have representatives make decisions. The first two examples of those come in the United States, which of course at this time is the 13 colonies, come in the form of the Mayflower Compact and the Virginia House. The Mayflower Compact is going to be the first attempt at self-government in the New World. And it is very simple. Local communities meet, usually at bars and restaurants, and they discuss and make decisions that's best for their community. And the people within the community are welcome to come to these meetings and vote on these issues. So the Mayflower Compact is an example of a democracy. The Virginia House is the first time that a colony, future state, elects representatives to make its decisions. The Virginia House of Burgesses is the first example of a republic at work on American soil. You have the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This is the first written constitution in the colonies. Your foundational documents are Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, okay, Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, Constitution, Bill of Rights. I'm going to tell you an easy way to remember that real quick. Friends, do always call back if you're positive, or if you're being negative, friends don't always call back. So let's look at that acronym. Friends, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Don't. D, Declaration of Independence. We declare our independence from England. A, always for A, the AOC, Articles of Confederation, the first U.S. Constitution. So friends, don't always call back. C, Constitution, back the Bill of Rights, which balances out the Constitution. More on that later. There were some meetings. There was the First Continental Congress. Not much happened. Then there's going to be the Second Continental Congress, and they meet, and for the first time, they really start looking at how do we win our independence? How do we declare freedom from the crown? They start talking about things like the Declaration of Independence, and they start planning to throw off British rule, essentially how we can fight a war which will become the American Revolutionary War. The Olive Branch Petition was the last-ditch effort at peace between the colonies and the King of England, King George. It failed, however, because a leaked letter from John Adams saying that peace was never possible, that if we don't fight a war now, we'll fight a war a year, 2, 3 years down the road, got leaked, sent to King George, and he said, all right, scrap this peace deal, we're going to war. In the United States, an olive branch represents peace, hence the name Olive Branch Petition. That's why you have the eagle holding on the presidential seal the olive branch to represent peace, but of course in the other part of the talon on the presidential seal, the eagle has arrows to represent war. President of the United States, presidential seal. You also have El Pluribus Unum, out of many we are one. So we're a nation of immigrants that makes up the United States of America. So that's going to do it. I told you it was going to be a little shorter. That's going to do it for 1.2, and that's it for the Unit 1 notes. Please email any questions you have to me at bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe.